If you take a dip in the sea in the UK and your friend does the same in Australia, that's the same as being in one big swimming pool together. So says Nicola Bridge of the Ocean Conservation Trust. 71% of planet Earth is covered in seawater, and that is all one single ocean. The ocean gives us food, well-being, and a means of transport across vast distances. It is also crucial in regulating the health of our planet as a whole. But it is often taken for granted by us humans. Nicola is passionate about giving the ocean a voice and speaks to MetroWild about why we need to think ocean and talk ocean. This is the MetroWild podcast where we celebrate city life and wild nature. I'm your host, Yang-May Ooi. My guest today is Nicola Bridge. Nicola is the head of ocean advocacy and engagement at the Ocean Conservation Trust. She is a founder of the We Are Ocean network and president of the European Marine Science Educators Association. Nicola is also co-chair of a UN Ocean Decade Working Group, focusing on global sustainable change in human behaviour to support the health of the ocean. She is passionate for each of us to recognise that everyone on the planet is responsible for the health of the natural world that sustains us, and that it is up to all of us to protect habitats and species. Nicola Bridge. We tend to talk about different oceans, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, and so on. But it is, of course, one single ocean. From the environmental and ecological point of view, can you give us a big picture overview of the role of the ocean in the context of our planet Earth? Nothing like starting with the big question.
Yes, there are a list of 7 things that we should know about the ocean if we're ocean literate. And the first thing on that list is there is only one ocean. Yes, we've called different parts of the ocean different things, and we have seas, inland seas almost as well. But actually, the point is that all water is connected. So we live on planet Earth. And a lot of people in my field really advocate for the idea that actually we live on planet ocean. The ocean covers 70% of our planet. And if we look back into the kind of evolution of living things on our planet, life began in the ocean. We are all from the ocean. We are watery beings. Inside us, there's salt. Our blood, the water inside us is directly linked to the water in the ocean. But on a very kind of practical level, what does the ocean do? How does it, look after us? How does it make the world go round? It obviously gives us food. So seafood, many cultures and communities and countries, their main source of protein is fish from the sea. But as well as that, there are still farmed animals, chickens, cows, pigs, sheep, that will eat fish meal within their kind of diets. So it's fully embedded within the food chain. So even if you're somebody that doesn't directly eat seafood, you probably, if you eat meat, will eat an animal that will have eaten some kind of fish meal in its diet. Things like the aggregate that builds roads, cosmetics that have different minerals from the sea as well. So not only does it kind of give us food, but it is all sorts of other things that we use on a daily basis that we get from the ocean. Habitats like seagrass and mangroves that grow in our oceanic waters that help to kind of protect us on land from storm surges and large waves and things like that. Obviously, hugely linked to tourism, recreation, livelihoods, global blue economy. You could say that in the modern world, it kind of helps us in those kind of economic ways too. There's water in rivers, streams, lakes, in the sky. So the ocean really drives the weather and also the climate. So it's a huge carbon sink. and also has been responsible for regulating the amount of carbon that we do release into the atmosphere. Depending on which reports you read, it's up to 90% of the carbon that we've produced is expected to have been drawn in by the ocean. Obviously, it provides us with an amazing array of biodiversity, fish, dolphins, plankton, all these incredible creatures. The ocean is incredibly biodiverse. And then probably the final kind of thing that it does for us, the thing that it does for the world, is it gives us a sense of place. There are so many cultures that are linked with the ocean. I'm in the UK right now. We're an island nation, and many of us really have become a little bit disconnected from the sea that provides us with all of these things. But there are other people on this planet that are completely reliant on the ocean every day. They see it every day. They know that it keeps them alive. There's a real kind of cultural, emotional, art, history, huge link between human beings and the ocean in that respect as well. And so it also looks after our health too, our mental health and also our physical health. We worked with DEFRA and lots of other cool people from around the world on a huge public perception of the ocean survey.
For our listeners, what is DEFRA?
The Department for the Environment, Fisheries and Rural Affairs. And that survey showed us that thousands every year make trips to the ocean for mental and physical well-being.
My understanding is that if you're by the sea, there is something, not quite ozone, but something that is released into the air that is good for mental health. And also there are minerals in the water where if you're depressed, you swim in the sea and it helps you. I did English at uni, so my science and biology is quite weak, but that's what I understand from my general reading.
Yes, you're completely right. Yeah, there's lots more research happening around this. So there are, ions in the air around us when we go down to the salty water that help us to feel good. There's also research around the light waves that you get from blue water. Apparently that's kind of calming and good for our eyes to look at. Additionally, there's something known as Heraclitean motion. It's when we as humans look at flames flickering or clouds gently moving across the sky or waving grass or waves, the tide coming in and out very gently, because they're very predictable movements, but also slightly different. They kind of keep our attention, but we don't have to use a lot of our brain power to look at those motions. And it's believed that that's really good for our kind of restoration as well, for our brains. It can really keep you calm.
So I just want to pick up the thread in terms of human history, because of course now we fly everywhere and we miss the big expanses of ocean. And my recollection of the picture of the globe is you'll find all the bits of land clustered in one little half of or area of the globe, and the rest of it is ocean, which we don't see when we look at maps, because people who make maps put things there that are interesting to us, and to them, the ocean is not interesting. But I imagine there must be maritime maps, and I'm understanding that the new field of Earth observation from satellites is also mapping the different terrain that is under the sea. Is that correct?
Yes. There are lots of different ways that you can map the seabed, from sonar to all sorts of other different techniques. And AI, autonomous vehicles, underwater vehicles are really going to help us to be able to do that. Obviously, some areas of the ocean are deeper than the height of Mount Everest. So these are difficult places for us to get to. But yes, one of the key outcomes of something called the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is to create a global ocean twin. So this will be a digital twin of the ocean, and to actually completely map the seabed so that we know everything down there in terms of valleys and tectonic plates and so on and so forth. Probably not where all the animals are, because obviously they move around. But yeah, a picture of the seabed that we can use to understand better currents and other things that impact the surface is one of the key kind of outcomes of that decade. What I would say, normally when we are sort of shown the globe, if you look at any kind of images of the globe, it's always with the Atlantic Ocean, with the Americas on one side, and the UK, Europe on the other. But if you turn your globe around, the other side is the Pacific Ocean, and you will see the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, the other side of our planet that's not normally kind of looked at in popular culture. You'll see how huge the Pacific Ocean is. It takes up a whole other side of the Earth.
And I think this is one of the things, isn't it? If we don't know about it, it's not on our radar or sonar, if you like, then we don't think about it. We tend not to think about the fish, the mammals, all the vegetation, the plankton that's in the sea, the valleys, and all the volcanic stuff that goes on under the surface. And we then take the ocean for granted. So we've looked at the ocean and its impact on human life and human civilization. What has been the impact of us humans in the reverse on the life and health of the ocean?
Despite the vastness of the ocean, there are probably almost no places that are untouched by human activity. I'm not sure if you've covered in your podcast yet the idea that we're in the Anthropocene. So we are living in a time where humans are impacting everything, and there's evidence of us everywhere. I'm very careful when I talk about this, issues and threats of human beings, because sometimes we kind of disassociate. So we think of pollution as a threat, or we think of climate change as a threat, but really they are just the products of our behavior. So we are the threat, really. So these things are not kind of random things that are happening. Oh no, there's some pollution there. Where's that come from? It is us. So I think that's very important actually for us all to think about in the future. How do we kind of flip that narrative that these aren't things that are just randomly happening? It is our behavior. So the effects of carbon in the oceanic system are mainly twofold. So there's something called ocean acidification. So when you kind of bubble carbon dioxide into water, it does become more acidic. And then when that happens, all sorts of knock-on effects. So from coral that has a calcium carbonate exoskeleton, things like crabs, shellfish, they can't grow their shells. They can't grow this calcium carbonate part of their body efficiently enough in more acidic conditions. The other thing is warming as well. So we know that the planet is warming as the oceans warm. There are more and more kind of key areas that are impacted by warming waters. Climate change is having a big impact on the ocean. And the worrying thing is that the ocean probably has been mitigating this for us for some time by the amount of carbon that it has been able to sequester through the habitats and animals dying, for example. You know, whales are huge carbon sinks. When a whale dies, it locks away lots of carbon. So if the ocean isn't able to kind of carry out its cycles in terms of its chemistry, we could start to see faster problems in terms of the impact of climate. There's a type of plankton called a coccolithophore, and they're white, and they're kind of the things that made the White Cliffs of Dover. So when everything's good for them, all the conditions are right, the coccolithophores bloom and the surface of the sea is white. And obviously that's really great because it reflects heat away. But as the conditions aren't as good for the coccolithophores to bloom, they don't bloom as much, so there's less white surface, so less heat is reflected away and more heat is absorbed. So there's just a sort of one of the feedback loops there around climate. Obviously, pollution, we all know at the moment sewage is high on the agenda in the UK. At the Ocean Conservation Trust, we take people snorkeling, rock pooling into the sea as often as we can in the summer. And last year, we had 150 people that couldn't do those activities because of pollution down here in the southwest. There's all kinds of different chemicals, sewage, unregulated activity in certain areas of the world where anything can be dumped, really. And then, the fishing industry, eating sustainable seafood and reducing the amount of seafood that you might eat is a really good option if you like seafood, because there are still, unfortunately, destructive activities that happen and unregulated areas where, unfortunately, overfishing occurs on a daily basis. So climate, fishing, pollution, probably they're the big three, but there are many other things, habitat destruction, and so on and so forth.
And I think, it goes back perhaps to the way that we conceptualize the ocean and rivers, which is a different episode probably. I need to talk to a rivers expert, but it's all connected. But in terms of, it's just this vast body of water. And back in the old days, you just kind of pump sewage straight there without thinking about it. And also, within one lifetime, when I was young, and we would throw our litter onto the streets and it would blow around. And it still happens, but we are much more aware of it. We just need to be more aware of it. And when you were talking about the ocean and how it absorbs carbon for us, I was thinking about like a filter for a swimming pool or a filter for an air conditioning unit getting all gunked up, and we're just chucking stuff at it and it's all getting all gunked up, and it's not as easy to clean. You can't just take the filter out and give it a bit of a rinse and a brush because it's the ocean. And I suppose it's about changing our mindset and changing our relationship with nature and the ocean to think of us as not just benefiting it, but as custodians in a way of, I love that Patek Philippe, that expensive watch. The tagline is something like, you don't own a Patek Philippe, you hold it for the next generation. And that really should be our tagline for our lives in terms of the planet, to pass it on in the way that we haven't messed it up. It's still working and it's still beautiful. Yeah. I also just want to flag this book that I read a long time ago called Flotsometrics. Have you come across that?
No.
It's a scientist who basically studied the ocean, and he looks at flotsam and jetsam, which is the bits and pieces, usually of driftwood, that floats with the currents. And he talked about a shipwreck of a container ship that had sneakers. It was in the 80s and 90s. And the left foot of the sneakers ended up in one particular place, one particular shore, and the right foot ended up in another shore. And that was all to do with currents and the shape of the sneakers. It was absolutely fascinating. So there was all this sort of fascinating stuff, but the most disturbing and upsetting bit of Flotsometrics was about the Great Rubbish Island, which is in the middle of the Pacific. I'm sure you know about that.
Yes. Oh, it's horrible to think about, isn't it? But yeah, there are some key ocean currents, huge ocean currents around the world. The biggest one is the thermohaline current, or the salt heat current, which moves warm air from the equator up to the North Pole, and then as it gets there, it gets really cold and salty and dense, and then it sinks down and it pulls the water behind it and then kind of pops back up again down in the south and then drives itself all the way round. So yeah, there are these big swirling, and you could say that one package of water within that current could take 1,000 years to kind of go through that current. So these are huge, vast conveyor belts of water within the Pacific, several of these huge swirling vortexes, basically. And they act as a kind of an aggregator of obviously natural things like seaweed and so on and so forth, and plankton, but also human debris, plastics, of course, anything that floats, wood. And there are several of these, Pacific garbage patches now. Lots of work has been done around what's in them. And there's some really, I don't like to tell the scary stories too much, but there's some really scary stuff. There's very old plastic there that you can date it by literally having dates on it. It's a water bottle or it's a packet of crisps or whatever, and you can see that it's from the 80s, and old bits of plastic, but are still perfectly, well, maybe a little bit degraded, but still very obvious what they are. And those things are going to be there for 100 years, if not more, breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces. And then when that happens, you get something called bioaccumulation. So that's when very small animals like the zooplankton will eat pieces of plastic. And then the larger animal will come along and eat, 50, 60, 100, 1,000 of the zooplankton, which have all got plastic in them. And then, so that animal then has a lot of plastic inside through the food it's eaten. Then as you move up the food chain, the animals at the very top, the top predators, are really being, in some ways, poisoned by the bioaccumulation, the plastic accumulation up the food chain into those top predators. So that's, a really horrible thing. And also this plastic, there's some studies that have shown that it's very porous, and so any other kind of poisonous chemicals, as we were talking about earlier, that we may have released into the ocean at sort of land side, they get stuck onto these pieces of plastic, and then almost the plastic becomes a poisonous substance as well as it being a piece of plastic. It's absolutely admirable to go and clean your beach. If you see plastic on the beach, pick it up, take it home, get rid of it. But what we really need to do is think much more further at the production point. How do we stop it getting into the system in the first place? How do we stop more getting out there? That's the really, really key thing.
So we've spent a little time on the bad news, which is important because I think just to reflect back on the point that I made where we were not aware, and then perhaps we became, we're sort of aware, but we don't really want to think about it. And now we are conscious and we are aware. So this is where I suppose the good news starts to kick into our story. It was World Ocean Day recently, and you were telling me just before we started recording about going off to the beautiful city of Venice for a big conference. Could you tell us about that?
I've been working in ocean conservation for a long time, and some of the things that we tried to do way back in 2006, like, have a climate exhibit at the aquarium in Plymouth, where I'm based, people just didn't want to know. We tried to have exhibits about plastics, and no, we're not really that interested in that. But it's true, from my perspective, my experience of this in this field is that 2011, the blue planet effect, is real. All of a sudden, people wanted to help. And the key thing there was that tragic image of that poor marine mammal with the plastic in its mouth swimming around in the sea. Because as you said, people just didn't know. This just was not the awareness of the amount of plastic out there. And that really was a key moment. And from there, there's a lot of scary stuff, but I have a lot of hope that things are changing and people really want to help and they want to know how to help, which is, for me, just brilliant. So yes, I was in Venice for World Ocean Day at an event called the World Ocean Literacy Conference. So if you've not heard of ocean literacy before, it's really now becoming a key ocean conservation factor. So an ocean literate society is a society that understands, values and cares for the ocean and takes action to protect it at all levels. It's really, really important. So the conference was all about people gathering together to write this Venice Declaration. And that is a kind of a list of key points that we want to make to the governments of France and Costa Rica, who are going to be running the United Nations Ocean Conference in June next year, to make sure that people's behaviour, people's connection to the ocean or ocean literacy is a key part of that conference. Obviously, it's really important for us to talk about the science of the ocean and the discoveries that we're making. But if we actually want to make a change, we need an ocean literate society to do that. It's great to know all of this data and really to see things continue to not be great. So actually it's time for action, and an ocean literate societies are those of us that are going to be taking that action.
So we've talked a lot about the ocean and humanity, the real huge big picture. You are from the Ocean Conservation Trust. What do you do, and why do we need the Ocean Conservation Trust and similar organisations?
What do I do? I can't believe that I've got this job. I just can't believe it. So my job title is Head of Ocean Advocacy and Engagement for the Ocean Conservation Trust. And so that all links really to the whole point of having the Ocean Conservation Trust. So what we want to do is help to be a voice for the ocean. So there are many amazing NGOs and organisations out there that do great campaigning work, great awareness raising. But where we focus as the Ocean Conservation Trust is on three kind of key things, and they're very action oriented. So we have a habitats programme, which is called Blue Meadows. So that's all about restoring, protecting, monitoring and engaging the community with seagrass along the southwest coast of the UK. And we've got some really great results coming in around some of our restoration methods and also brilliant compliance by boat users with the marker buoys that we're setting out along the southwest, which show where the seagrass is. You were saying totally correctly earlier on, people don't know what's down there. They don't know what's there. So how can they, look after it if they don't know it's there? So we've just very simply started to mark, hey, there's some seagrass here. Can you not kind of drop your anchor in it? And it's really great. People are really receptive to it. So that's brilliant. We have our Ocean Engagement Experiences programme, which is basically our wonderful National Marine Aquarium. So we're really proud as the Ocean Conservation Trust to have the aquarium as our home and our place where we're looking at about potentially 400,000 visitors a year coming through the doors that we can, as a charity, give our kind of charitable messages out around connecting with the ocean, loving the ocean, and maybe doing your bit to look after it, as well as looking at some really amazing animals that we have here and understanding some of the research that we do. And then the final kind of programme of the Ocean Conservation Trust is our advocacy programme, which is called Think Ocean. So that's all about trying to help people to think about the ocean every day, think about how it impacts our lives, how small things, small changes that you can do as an individual or as a business or as anyone really, a government, a local government can, put things in place to tweak the way that we behave, the things that we do to put the ocean at the heart of decision making and protection. So really action-oriented, planting seagrass, getting people in our aquarium and helping them to love the ocean, taking them snorkeling and rock pooling, and then also what action can people do to do their bit for the ocean. So that's why really we need the Ocean Conservation Trust. We're not necessarily a big campaigning organisation. And, we're very proud and happy to have colleagues in Surfers Against Sewage, Greenpeace, Extinction Rebellion, who, that real activist group of NGOs, brilliant. There's absolutely a place for those guys. But we're just that little bit different in the way that we try to be the gateway to accessing the ocean, finding out about perhaps some of the problems that it faces and what people can do themselves.
Well, I'll pick up the thread of action shortly, but I just want to flag for our listeners who may be interested in seagrass, and maybe they've tuned in to listen to you and hear about the Ocean Conservation Trust. An earlier podcast that I've done for MetroWild, it's called The Call of the Seagrass, and I interviewed a marine ecologist, Yang-May Ooi, and a theatre director, Zahim Al-Bakri. They're both based in Malaysia. And Gillian, as well as being a marine ecologist, she loves gamelan music, and she's in a gamelan orchestra called Rhythm in Bronze. And she got together with Zahim, the theatre director, and they created this genre-defying musical performance piece called The Call of the Seagrass. And it has gamelan music, it has actors and dancers, and she appears towards the end in a lab coat as the scientist giving a TEDx talk. And they only had 4 or 5 performances in KL, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. But she said that the people who came along were kind of like, seagrass, I don't know about this. But by the end of the performance, they were completely fascinated and wanted to find out more, and also pledged to take some voluntary action or give money towards the cause of saving the seagrass in Malaysia. So it's absolutely, this is the thing. Seagrass is the sexy thing right now, I feel.
It really is. So we've been working on seagrass for about 10 years now. So our first big grant-funded project that we got off the ground was called the Community Seagrass Initiative. And we worked, it was just a huge citizen science project down again along the southwest coast of the UK. And divers, snorkelers, kayakers gave hundreds of hours to help us to map where the seagrass was. Because again, back then no one really knew exactly where it was apart from local communities and people that had lived in the areas for a long time. But there wasn't that good quality map of where is the seagrass. And back then, like you said, seagrass was, whatever. We don't really know what that stuff is. And now, people are so interested in it. They're interested in the animals that live there, all of the different kind of ecosystem services that it does, from, stabilizing the seabed to helping with storm surges, coastal protection, basically. And as a place to go for recreation, snorkeling over a seagrass bed is a beautiful thing. And in Plymouth Sound, we have a voluntary no anchor zone around the seagrass meadows that we are kind of doing our research on. So we're trialing different methods of restoring the beds there. And people are great. They don't anchor there. They really respect the boys that kind of say, there's seagrass here, be careful. It's amazing. And the key big thing about seagrass is its ability to sequester carbon. It's something like 35 times better than the rainforest. We've lost 90% of UK seagrasses over, the last several years. So we definitely need to raise that awareness further of how beautiful and amazing it is, and then help people to do their bit to look after it.
So one of the things about something as big as the climate crisis is that you can get really down and depressed and, well, what's the point? What's the point of doing anything? We're all going to, it's all going to fall apart and there's nothing I can do. But actually, what I'm learning as I'm doing the MetroWild podcast and blog is, as I'm talking to more people, there are things that we can do. And one of the missions of MetroWild is to encourage people to become everyday activists. You don't have to go out there and wave a placard. You don't have to do anything that sort of, if you don't like groups, and I'm an introvert, so I don't like crowds, and I don't want to, shout because I'm a quiet sort of person. But in your everyday life, you can do things towards helping with the climate crisis. So can you talk about some of the things that the Ocean Conservation Trust is encouraging people and supporting people to do their bit towards slowing down climate change?
I've worked in this field for some time now, and it's a new phenomenon that younger people, if I go and do talks for universities or schools or whatever, say, how do you have hope? How do you keep going? And actually older people as well. So it's not just an anecdotal thing. It's so difficult to keep hope up, but we have to have hope. There's lots that you can do. So I'm sure many of your listeners already will be doing lots of great things, like perhaps cycling instead of using a car on some days, maybe taking public transport, perhaps, reducing their fast fashion, thinking about, having meat-free Mondays. So things that aren't really huge, dramatic changes. And we think we're doing those things for the environment, which we are. And because everything's connected, if you're already doing those things, you're already helping the ocean. So big ticks to anybody that's already doing stuff. So at the Ocean Conservation Trust, what we try to do is, there's no point in shouting at people, being horrible, forcing people to do things. We try to make things as easy as possible. So one of our key fun things that you can do is, are you ready for this? You can take our Think Ocean Challenge. So if you just type Think Ocean Challenge into Google, you'll find it. So you answer the questions, and then at the end of it, you'll get your ocean personality. So you can be in the head shoal, so you think about the ocean. You can be in the heart shoal, so you're really emotionally connected to the ocean, or the hands shoal, so you're somebody that gets in the ocean and does stuff. Or you can be a new starter, depending on how you answered the questions. And then once you've done that, you'll get a little email, and it will give you just a list of really small, simple to achieve micro habits. You can do one thing out of that list, or you can do all of them. And also they kind of appear in a kind of like a flow. So you can do one thing one day and one thing another day and another thing another day. This is based on psychology. By changing one small thing, you realize, oh, actually, that wasn't so difficult and I feel good about doing that. I might do another thing and another thing. But the really important thing there is that sometimes the things that we want to do are not achievable because of the system in which we live. We might want to recycle more. We might want to get public transport. We might want to buy an electric car, but there's not enough charging points. The public transport doesn't take me to where I want to go. I try to recycle, but my local council doesn't actually take the recycling and do it properly. So we are completely aware of this, and we're not just doing this in a bubble without understanding that there are many things that stop us being capable to make the changes that we want to make. So that's why, kind of in parallel to the Think Ocean Challenge, we've also been working on projects which is all about asking local councils to declare a motion for the ocean. So it's a bit like the climate recovery declarations. It's basically an ocean recovery declaration. So the first one happened in 2021 in November here in Plymouth, where I am now. So Plymouth City Council declared an urgent need for ocean recovery, and their declaration has got 7 points around what they'll do as a local council to ensure that the ocean is included in decision making. So it's things like, thinking about the fisheries here, encouraging schools in the city to educate children about the ocean, thinking about the ocean when they're making kind of urban planning decisions. And then it's a bit of a slow burn, but it is working because we now have 27 councils that have each declared their own version of the motion for the ocean. In each location, they're slightly different because of that particular community and the situation that council finds itself in. So then, there are individual things that we can do, but we're also saying we understand that there's this whole system that might be preventing you from doing the things that you want to do. So actually challenge, here is a way for citizens to challenge back to their local council so that it's not just on the individual. And then obviously there's the whole kind of business and corporate field as well, and we're working with as many corporates that we can kind of contact around their staff taking the Think Ocean Challenge, and also how can they make changes at their kind of level of society, if we call it that, around things that they do that might harm the ocean, and kind of switching some of that around.
What I love about that is that there are you can do something. And I think one of the things when you're depressed and down, just at an individual level, is if you're just sitting there and feeling helpless, it's really disempowering. But if you can do something, and with the support of your Think Ocean Challenge and the tips and ideas of what you can do, that really gives us a greater sense of empowerment and feeling that we are part of a movement, a cause that aligns with our values. And I was thinking about this because some years ago, when people were talking about, climate change, we've got to do something, because it's future generations. I don't have any children. So my initial reaction was, well, why should I bother? I don't have any children. But actually, that was a knee-jerk reaction, a defense mechanism, an excuse not to change. And when I reflected upon it, I thought, well, that may be so, but I want to be on the right side of history. I want to be part of a movement right now in my own lifetime that is actually has meaning and purpose, that is greater than who I am, and greater than my family, greater, than that. It's and being part of something, being part of change, which can be difficult, is exciting, and which is part of the reason why I started MetroWild, to connect with experts and storytellers and other people who are all moving towards doing something big. And it's also a question of, well, what kind of person am I? Am I the person that litters? Am I the person that just leaves my electric lights on? Do I waste the resources that are so precious, in particular because, of course, the earth and its resources are finite? We tend to think, I can just use stuff. Petrol won't run out, but it will because it's finite. There's a lot of it, so it seems to be infinite, but it's not. And so what kind of person am I? And I suppose to my listeners, I hope that we'll all be inspired by what Nicola is saying in terms of the ocean and what we can do. But I want to throw something to you, Nicola. It's like, well, it's all very well. You're in Plymouth. You're right there by the sea. What about landlocked people or landlocked councils? Why should they care about the ocean?
It's about motivation. So what is your motivation? I'm the same as you. I don't have children. And my motivation is, it's so weird. It's just something inside me that I just love nature and I love the sea. You know, I've always been by the sea, and I was there as a tiny little toddler swimming about. And then, I found out about the amazing animals. And then as I've grown, I won't say how old I am now, I've found out about all of these amazing cultures around the world that worship the ocean and have just this incredible relationship with it. And just, they don't feel a separate entity from it. They are it and it is them. And I find it fascinating. I love it. And so, yeah, you're right. Why should somebody care that doesn't live anywhere near the sea? Why should an inland council care? Why should a business care that's, miles away from the ocean? I think it's all part of this connection that we're having with nature. So if you can realize that you may be miles away, but the rain falling on your head is part of the water cycle, which is part of the ocean. The carbon that you release by any activity that you do, wherever you are, will go into the carbon cycle, which is driven around with the water cycle as well. It's all completely interconnected. Any item that is in a property, a business, a council, on the table, probably came on a boat across the ocean. The cables that connect us, the internet and phones and so on and so forth, that runs under the sea. There are just so many ways. The food that we eat, you may be miles away, but that huge system on our planet has got an impact on everybody, and then in turn, obviously, everybody can have an impact on it. And somehow or other, there is that drip of people realizing, okay, we are all inextricably interconnected as people and also with nature. We will get there and we will reconnect. I know we will. Well, there's all this in the surge of people reconnecting. When the pandemic happened, everybody was outside like, oh my God, I need nature. There's all this wonderful work around ocean health and human health. And we can't be healthy if the ocean isn't healthy. We just can't. So, yeah, I think just we need to continue with podcasts like you're doing now, just reaching out into places that might not be right next to the sea as I am, and just reconnecting people, restoring that relationship that we once had with the ocean, so that we just know that, I may be miles away, but everything that I do is linked to it. Bits in toothpaste, the algae in toothpaste comes from the sea.
There's algae in toothpaste? I didn't know that.
Yeah, actually, toilets. Everyone's got a toilet. If you put something down the toilet, it could get in the ocean. Toilets lead to the ocean. They lead to a river. So, yeah, if you're anywhere near a toilet, you're connected to the ocean right now.
Oh, I love that. So you touched on your work as the Ocean Conservation Trust with businesses and corporations. And we tend to think of individuals versus corporations, but of course we are individuals. We work in businesses, in organizations. Some of us work in multinationals, others in a small business, but those businesses have an ecosystem. Small businesses are connected to bigger businesses and so on. And businesses and corporations and councils and organizations have a much wider reach. They also have a bigger impact on the environment and on the individuals that work there. So for someone listening who is in some way connected to a corporation, a business, an organization, a community group or some such, what can these people do within their organization, particularly also those who have, at decision making levels, CEOs, director levels, and also, the intern. You may be a young person, you started in this big company, you're really passionate, you want to do something. How can all these people in different levels of organizations affect change at this high level?
Great question. So it's about thinking ocean, but it's about talking ocean as well. A lot of the times, particularly large corporations have got corporate social responsibility teams and so on and so forth. So if they're reviewing kind of corporate social responsibility policies and paperwork, where can you mention the ocean within that? And then once you've got that kind of policy or strategic mention of the ocean, it does become easier to kind of weave it through the narrative of work that you're doing in terms of environmental protection. So there's definitely something around that. On a more practical, fun note, the Think Ocean Challenge is open access. Anyone can do it. So, if there's a staff newsletter, if you've got a staff intranet, if you're allowed access to that, chuck that on there. Hey, everyone, why don't we all do the Think Ocean Challenge? Then you can find out who's in what shoal. Maybe you can have little internal competitions. It's just talking about the ocean. What we get quite a lot is corporates and businesses phoning up asking if we would help them to do a beach clean. That's one of the biggest asks that we get. Beach cleans are great, but actually we don't do that. We do community beach cleans with local people, but for corporates, what we ask is for them to start an ocean conversation within the organization. So to do the Think Ocean Challenge, to join one of our lunch and learns, and then just start having conversations about how the business operates and where there might be some links to other ways of working that might reduce climate impact, which obviously positively impacts the environment and also the ocean. So it's just about bringing the ocean into the conversation. So anytime anyone's talking about any kind of, environmental support, you need your ocean advocate, your internal ocean advocate that just reminds everybody, hey, this helps the ocean too. And then obviously you could just go mad with it, really. You could, from fundraising for the ocean to marathon running for the ocean. We've got people rowing across the Atlantic for the ocean for us at the moment. There's all sorts of different things to do, but I think what the ocean needs is it needs a voice. So the first step really is to just share that ocean conversation with people who you work with and start to, that one little drip ripples out, and then you could have some really good impact.
And I think what is exciting, if there are people listening who are part of big corporations or multinationals, because, hey, you guys are so influential. Your reach is enormous. And so, talk to the Ocean Conservation Trust or other charities out there or organizations, non-profits, how you can think big, think creatively about how to think ocean, how you can practically do something towards the health of the ocean.
Financial conversations are always, you've got to be careful, haven't you? But it's worth noting that of the Sustainable Development Goals, I'm sure your listeners will be aware of those. SDG 14 is life below water, and it is the least funded of all of the Sustainable Development Goals. So money is it's to be able to do the research, to be able to produce the campaigns, a global Think Ocean campaign, getting everybody to love the ocean. We've always wanted to do some kind of fun thing where everyone goes and puts their foot in the ocean, because as we said right at the beginning, there is one ocean. So I could be swimming in the sea here in Plymouth, and my friends in Australia, if they're in the sea at the same time, we're swimming in the same sea. We're in the same, the same pool of water. And that's such a great connector. But often those things, they're just sort of seen as not conservation, but actually it is conservation. Getting people to connect with the ocean, finding that motivation that we talked about earlier. What is my motivation? Why I loved yours. You wanted to be an active citizen. Mine is I just love the animals. I just love the ocean. I want to look after it because I feel like that's what I'm here to do. We need campaigns and activities and ways that people can connect. And rather than it being a nice fluffy thing, it's really important, but it does cost money. So funds for those kind of things are really vital for the Ocean Conservation Trust.
I'm all for not being shy talking about money, because someone very wise said, money is just energy. You exchange it for something that has value. In itself, it's nothing. It's no point just hoarding money. But if you do something of value with your money, whether it's saving the ocean, whether it's feeding your family, it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Oh, I love that. I think, yeah, I totally agree.
Nicola Bridge, do you have any final words for our listeners?
We are all connected to the ocean. There are many ocean threats, but actually those threats are just an outcome of human behaviour. And we as a society, it's time to restore our relationship with the ocean. We need it. It needs us. So conservation isn't for conservationists anymore. It's for all of us. There's something that we can all do to help at whatever level in society we are and whatever it is that we do.
I was speaking with Nicola Bridge of the Ocean Conservation Trust. There are credits, photos and links to some of the things we talked about on the show notes page. Go to metrowild.co.uk and search for Ocean Conservation Trust or Nicola Bridge. The views expressed by my guests are entirely their own and do not necessarily reflect my views. This podcast is part of the larger MetroWild magazine-style blog. Go to metrowild.co.uk to find a whole range of articles celebrating city life and wild nature. In my conversation with Nicola, I mention my other conversation with marine ecologist Julian Ooi and theatre director Zahim Al-Bakri, where they talk about the call of the seagrass. That's episode 7 of the MetroWild podcast, if you'd like to have a listen to that as well. And staying with the ocean theme, you can listen to artist Chris Otley talking about how the seascape of Northumberland inspires his work. That's episode 5, Slow Celebration of the Everyday. I would love it if you followed the MetroWild podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Audible. It's free. New episodes will then appear in your pod listening app as soon as I release them into the wild. A handy link to find the podcast is podfollow.com/MetroWild. The link to the full MetroWild multimedia magazine again is metrowild.co.uk. You can also like the MetroWild Facebook page at facebook.com/MetroWildUK. MetroWild is also on Instagram and YouTube as @MetroWildUK. I'm Yang-May Ooi. Thank you for listening and see you again soon.